G'day guys, welcome back to the channel. This video has taken a little bit longer than I expected to make. It's now over 12 months since I did the phase 1 video of my Triton setup. So I've been running this setup with the new Carryboy Canopy for a little while and getting a good feel for how it all operates. I'm going to give you a run through of the changes I've made since I did the phase 1 video. And it's just going to be a basic overview because I do plan on doing some more in-depth videos on the individual components at some stage as well. And I'll do an overall camping setup video as well as soon as I get a chance to go camping. Unfortunately, I haven't actually been camping this year to date. It's now June 2022. We've had a hell of a lot of rain in Brisbane and I've been pretty busy with work this year so far. So the stars have not yet aligned to allow me to get out and enjoy the great outdoors, but hopefully coming up into winter we'll get some good clear weather and I'll be able to get out there. Right, so as I mentioned, the Carryboy Canopy was the main part of this build. I couldn't really do anything until I got that on, and I did that at the end of April 2021. So I decided to go with the two pop-up windows. That seemed to give me the most access, and that allowed the greatest flexibility for building the drawers and etc. inside and give me the greatest amount of access there. So we'll now just go around to the back and I'll show you what I've done with the drawers and fridge slide, etc. So you may have already noticed this little bit of wood here. This is my flip-up table. It's a bit of a prototype. It's still working. It's one of the first things that I did put on there. But I didn't kind of take into account that the back of the tailgate here isn't exactly flat. So when I screwed down the bit of wood, it has cracked, but it's still holding. The only little tricky thing with this is that this does need to be down for it to flip over. And then I just prop it up using this little swag pole, just like so. So obviously you can use your tailgate as a table, but there's nothing more frustrating than having to move everything off there if you're trying to get access to your drawers or your fridge. So having a table like this works really well. It's quite solid. It'll easily take the weight of my stove, a sink, anything like that. So for a quick setup, that works really well. I do normally carry another table to use for food prep, etc. But this is a good little simple option. All right, so here we are in the back, and this is where all the magic happened. Actually pretty proud of myself for what I've created here. As I mentioned in phase 1 video, I had no idea what I was doing. I've never really built anything like this before. No experience making any sort of cabinetry or anything. So it took me quite a while to kind of figure out the best way to set this up. The first thing that went in was the water tank, which is right at the back. It's a Boab 42 litre water tank. So as soon as the canopy went on, that was pretty much the first thing to go in. Right after that, the next thing that was done was the actual tracks for the roof racks on the canopy, because I knew those needed to be installed. They needed access inside to be able to install that. So I did that before I did any of this build. So I just got roof racks galore to put that tracking in, and later on I just found some roof racks to go with it. So after the water tank, the next thing was to put a baseboard in. So you give me a base that I could then build on top of. So I used some 17mm plywood, and that's pretty much what I use for most of the build. There's a little bit of 12mm as well in there. So I just created a stencil out of cardboard and cut around the wheel arches. So that gave me something I could transfer then onto the plywood and cut it out. So my plan for this was to start from the left and work my way across to the right. I knew that I wanted this little shelving section here, with the top section being my charging station, and I'll get into that a little bit later. I had some 25mm square tubing lying around at home, so I've used that as much as possible and then just bought a little bit extra that I needed from Bunnings, and basically just screwed that to the floor. And then the next step was to work out the width of this drawer slide to fit the fridge, and also work out what depth I needed to give some space for the battery in the battery box, which is sitting down in behind there. So it was a bit of a trick to work out exactly the height that I could still open up the fridge and access it with the tailgate up. So I can still reach in there and grab some drinks out without having to slide the whole fridge out, which is pretty handy. So I just used some Dun & Watson slides, heavy duty slides. So the fridge goes out to that point there, and then I built another drawer underneath. So this drawer here slides out as well underneath. And I do have an idea of possibly putting a little bench top that sits in top there as well, to give me another little bench space. But then I would probably have to support that underneath to stop it from moving around. So at this stage I haven't done it, I'm just using it as a drawer. And that fits my Coleman Gladiator series camp stove, plus a few other little accessories. So as I mentioned, those two drawers are on the Dun & Watson slides. So this drawer here I designed to go back as far as possible, so it goes the full length back as far as the water tank at the back. And I just used some HDPE slides on that, so there's no drawer slides. It's basically just friction slide. And as you can see, it's a pretty big drawer. So the back of this long drawer, I've just popped in a gate latch and a little bit of metal angle just to hold that in. So this drawer can come all the way out. Normally this is where I would store all my camp cooking gear and a little bit of recovery gear as well. Okay, so basically the width of this drawer was figured out once I knew the size of this drawer to accommodate the fridge. So it basically went right up to as far as the wheel arch, and that gave me this little space here. So I've added a couple of little shelves in there as well. As you can see, here is the hose for the water tank. At this stage I'm still running a gravity fed system. I haven't decided on whether I'm going to put in a pump at this stage. This works pretty well. Still gives me plenty of water, especially if I just angle it down. So that hose just rolls up and slides in there next to the fire extinguisher. And at the moment the little shelf here has just got my tool roll, but that is generally a space where I would put my companion Aqua Heat Lithium shower or a jerry can, either or, depending on what I'm doing or where I'm going. So this section at the back here is normally pretty inaccessible, so I decided I'd put a shelf across. So it spans from this side right across to the back of the electrical section, and runs over the top of the battery box, which is down in the back there. So I've butted that up against the water tank. I used some existing holes that were there from the tonneau cover, and just basically ran some more of that 25mm alu tubing across, and have just sat this wood panel on top of it as a shelf. And I've added some tie down points onto that as well. So things like chairs, my inflatable mattress, that sort of thing goes in there, and I can easily access that from this window here. So let's have a look at the passenger side, and this is the sort of electrical side. This is what I call my charging station, just down in here. As you can see, I've used a King's box, and it just fits in there. I've also got the kick-ass travel oven here, and I've just wired up a 12 to 15 volt step-up converter for that. Haven't had a chance to really test it, but I understand that it is going to cut down the preheat time by at least half. So you're probably looking about 30-35 minutes to get it to temp using one of those, whereas before it was like an hour 20 minutes. So made some modifications to the King's box. I rearranged these Anderson plugs because they were pointing down originally. So I put them to the side, and this is where I can plug in my travel oven. As you saw in the phase 1 video, the battery box had a solar input, and so I've just got a cable running, and that just sits up in here, so I can plug in my portable solar panel at any point. So the King box normally comes with a little voltage readout, so I pulled that out and replaced that with a USB-C adapter, so that has a quick charge capability as well. So that has USB Type-C and a USB-A connection, as well as there's two 5 volt, 1 amp and a 2.1 amp USB-A connection there, and the 3 12 volt cigarette adapters. Now I have wired up a lighting switch, and I've got some hardcore lights that I can plug into that. There's one that's mounted inside, just the LED strip, which is velcroed onto the inside of the canopy. These 3 switches at this stage don't do anything. I haven't plugged them into anything. The other addition down near the battery box is a 1200 watt inverter. It's a eBay special inverter. I can't even remember the name of it, but I'll pop it in the description below. That has an isolation switch here, and we've got our 2 GPO sockets there. So I'm mainly using that just to charge my drone batteries, things like that. I'm not running any sort of major electrical stuff from there, so 1200 watt is plenty. So next to that is the power on-off switch for the inverter. And above the GPOs is a Renogy battery monitor. So that gives our voltage, what's actually coming out in amps, an indication of how many amp hours are left in my 100 amp hour battery, and also the percentage of charge, as well as the time remaining at that amount of discharge. So all the accessories run through a shunt, which is attached to the battery box, and then obviously that all goes through to this monitor here. So it's a pretty handy little monitor, and it only costs around $110. So as I mentioned before, one of the first things I did was put the railing in for the roof racks. I then found a couple of Rhino racks on Marketplace for 70 bucks, so that was a bargain. And then I found this mesh rack also on Marketplace for a couple $100, so quite a bit of saving there over what those would have cost new. So I've had them on there for a while, but the last things to go on are the kick-ass shower awning and the Drifter 270 awning. So the kick-ass awning is on a pair of rack spracks, so they're easily removable because I don't need that on there all the time. So I just store that at home in the garage and then pop it on when I go away. That's only been on there for a couple of months. Haven't actually even had a chance to use it yet. But hopefully get to test that out pretty soon. So on the passenger side, obviously I've got the Drifter Stockton awning. So that's fairly new as well. I did do a pre-order for this, so I've actually had it sitting at home unmounted for quite a number of months, but only recently just got it mounted. It was a little bit tricky because they do require 3 brackets at minimum, 2 at the back here. So I had to use one of the brackets on the actual roof bar and then clamp the other bracket to the mesh. But anyway, I'm going to do a separate video on the awning after I've had a good chance to test it out. I've only used it a couple of times just for a bit of shade at this stage. so hasn't seen any wet weather yet. So after I've had a good test with it, I'll do a proper review video. Another very recent addition has been the steady light bar. That only went on probably about a month ago. Had a couple of mates help me fit that in. I did have a little bit of an issue. Originally I bought the 32-inch, and with the proper steady Rhino rack brackets, it wouldn't fit. So if you're looking at these steady light bars, this is the ST4K. I had to eventually go with the 28-inch to make it work with these brackets. So the 32 wouldn't fit, the 44 possibly would, but the 44 was a little bit too much for me, price-wise, and a bit of overkill for my needs. So the 28 does a good job. I'll overlay a little bit of footage of how bright that actually is, so you can just get an idea. The only real change I've made to the interior is adding this reverse camera slash dash cam. So there's a camera that I've stuck in just above the license plate in the back there. That gives me full-time rear vision, which is really handy because when I put the canopy on, I've discovered that vision out the back just via the mirrors was pretty terrible. This is just an Amazon job. Again, I can't remember the brand name, but I'll put it in the description below. It's been fantastic. The footage is really clear, and it allows you to swipe between front and rear cameras. You can also use your finger to scroll up and down to change your angle of view. So that works really well, and that's probably one of my favorite mods. And the final little addition that I've made is just to pop the shovel mounts attached to the Rhino rack. I found these little mounts online, they work pretty well, and I had a couple of the, what do you call these things? Pretty sure they're called quick fists. They're little rubber clamps. Had some of them lying around, so I just screwed them to the brackets, and that works a treat. That's pretty solid. But again, it's not something I leave up there all the time. It's only for heading for some beach driving. So there you go, guys. That was a really quick video. I actually rushed through that because it's starting to run out of light here. Hopefully you got something out of that. Hopefully you got some ideas for what you can do with your setup. That's pretty much all the changes I've made to date on phase 2. Is there going to be a phase 3? Well, possibly. Phase 3 is probably just going to be adding some more protection. I am looking at getting some bash plates at this point, and then potentially a bull bar. But then that'll have to mean I'll probably need to look at upgrading my suspension, adding all that extra weight. So something I'm not in that much of a hurry to do because I'm not doing any real serious four-wheel driving. So hopefully I can get out camping pretty soon, and then I'll be able to do a few more rundown videos on all the individual components and show you a bit more about my camping setup and how I use the drawers, etc. And that'll give you a better idea of how that system all works. Thanks again for watching, and until I see you in the next video, ciao for now.